Hello and welcome to Kingston Now. I'm Jimmy Buff. This week we're going to talk to Scenic Hudson, the organization credited with starting the modern grassroots environmental movement. Here with us is Scenic Hudson's Director of Communications, Jay Burgess, and the Director of Land Use Advocacy, Jeff Anzevino. Hi, guys.
Hello.
So, Scenic Hudson started in 1963. That means next year you're coming up on your 50th anniversary. You have some big plans?
Yeah, we've joked a little bit about a red sports car and a mistress, but yeah, we are cooking up some things, and we'll look to use it as an opportunity to engage more and more people in the work we're doing and have them enjoy a lot of the great parks we've created and other things.
So let's talk about 1963. What happened in 1963 that spurred the start of Scenic Hudson, Jay?
Well, it's a really interesting story. It started with about 5 or 6 people around someone's kitchen table down in the Highlands area of the valley. And there was a large proposal to put an industrial facility carved right into the side of Storm King Mountain, a great historic and really visually striking part of the Highlands. And they decided that they didn't think that ought to happen, and it really hadn't occurred before, but citizens got together and they began an effort that eventually defeated the proposal.
What's extraordinary about that is that there was no organization like Scenic Hudson or Riverkeeper or something to back those folks up. They just decided they were going to do it themselves. How did that process work out?
Well, you had cited that Scenic Hudson is credited with launching the modern grassroots environmental movement. And what that's based upon is a legal right for citizens that was won from this Storm King battle. And it's called standing. And it means that this case created for the first time a legal right for residents to be able to speak on the record in favor of and challenging large proposals that would happen in their area. And that came out of this fight.
At the center of this group around the kitchen table, though, was a pretty extraordinary woman named Franny Reese. Jay, can you talk about Franny a little bit? I'm sorry, Jeff, can you talk about Franny a little bit?
Well, Franny, we credit her as being our founder, one of our founders, and she was an amazing woman. She was tenacious in her ability to fight different programs, different proposals, and she was just very inspirational to all of us as the years went by, and we worked very closely with her.
And it was 1963. She was kind of a housewife, right? She had kids, she was raising a family, and she was fighting this incredible project that she didn't want to happen. And no one had ever done that successfully before.
Well, yes, and she was very dedicated and very determined. She lived quite a long life, and she passed tragically in a car accident, car crash a few years ago. And she was very active. She was playing tennis right through all her years. She was an amazing woman.
So when people cross the Mid-Hudson Bridge between Highland and Poughkeepsie and they see Franny Reese State Park, they'll now know that this was the woman behind this organization, and she's memorialized there in that wonderful, wonderful land use thing that you've got going there.
That's right.
The land use advocacy, tell me about the phrase, the land that matters most.
Well, the land that matters most is really our land acquisition paradigm. We do have a land conservation program. It's based on various ecological, scenic, and agricultural qualities. So there is land from the Hudson Highlands north up into the Capital District. We evaluate that using computer mapping processes, and when these 3 qualities overlap, scenic areas, ecological areas, and agricultural areas, those are the highest priorities lands that we protect. So it could be for ecological purposes or recreation or viewshed protection.
Now 50 years on into Scenic Hudson, you're involved in so many more things than just one project. Can you talk about some of those, Jay? Like what are some of the things that are on the table for Scenic Hudson these days?
Well, as we were saying, with our Saving the Land That Matters Most campaign, that is the focal point of our mission. We're preserving land, family working farms, as Jeff described, and also creating public parks, adding to a system of public parks we have all up and down the river. We're also doing planning, which is the area that Jeff heads up, working with elected officials, businesses, and community members to try to create a blueprint for revitalizing their waterfront with a mix of parks and public areas and also businesses that complement that, and really trying to create the riverfront as a public hub for communities. Then we're also engaged in being an environmental watchdog, so trying to ensure that General Electric and the EPA have the cleanup of PCBs from the Hudson River continue and be done successfully. And we also weigh in on major industrial proposals that might affect the health of the river, its system, also people's access, and to enjoy the great beauty of the river that's so inspiring.
How many parks do you own or maintain up and down the Hudson?
Well, in our history, we have created or enhanced about 50, and now we are actually managing about 30.
What is the difference between owning and managing? Is it just a land ownership issue that someone says, well, I'll let you use it, but I don't want to sell it to you? What's the difference?
In some cases, we have created a park, preserved the land, created a park, but then it's been transitioned to a municipality or New York's DEC or Office of Parks, and they now are managing that park and running it.
Terrific. We're going to talk more about this when we come back in just a moment. You're watching Kingston Now. More with Scenic Hudson when we return. Welcome back to Kingston Now. This week we're talking about preserving the land that matters most with Jay Burgess and Jeff Anzevino of Scenic Hudson. So Jeff, you're the land use advocacy expert for Scenic Hudson. I saw in the Kingston newspaper a couple months back something called the Kingston Waterfront Revitalization Plan that you're part of. Can you explain what that is?
Well, the city and Scenic Hudson and other stakeholders are really working to bring life to the city's waterfront. You know, the waterfront at one time was really a hub of commercial activity. There was a lot of shipping going on down there. There were railroads connecting down to the riverfront. When the highways were built through the 20th century, a lot of that activity, the commercial activity, the transportation functions really left the waterfront, leaving behind in some cases polluted sites, but a lot of abandonment. Now we realize that the cities are really our hope for the future, and with the river being cleaned up, the Rondout Creek water quality being better, everybody wants to be back down on the river. So there's a lot of desire to build things on the river so people can then enjoy what it has to offer.
And so what kind of things are you talking about? Are they like kayak and boat ramp launches and things like that? What are you talking?
Well, it could be a lot of things. One thing is uses that need to be on the riverfront, marinas, any kind of fishing operations. We call those water-dependent uses because they depend on riverfront location to be viable. But there are also things that being on the river makes it more appealing, such as restaurants, waterfront esplanades, parks, fishing piers, retail shops. So it's really a mix of that type of activity. Even some, we want to have people be able to easily get to the riverfront and enjoy the river for all it offers.
So what stage in planning for this are you at? Is it just an idea that you've just introduced, or is planning happening and things happening now?
Well, planning it is happening now, and it's been an ongoing thing since when I moved to the Hudson Valley and started with Scenic Hudson in 1991. The city passed its original local waterfront revitalization program. And from that, a lot of good things have happened on the Rondout already. And I think now the city is really gearing up for another phase of that. That we'll be seeing here in the coming years. We had a great conference down on the riverfront back in January. We had about 100 people come down, local officials from not only Kingston but other riverfront communities in Ulster County to share ideas about what they're doing to make the river a happening place.
So is that the group of people who will be involved in the planning and the execution of the waterfront revitalization? It's going to be people from Kingston, people from Scenic Hudson, business owners?
Absolutely. We call those stakeholders. Anybody that's got a stake in what the outcome of what happens. So not only Scenic Hudson and the city of Kingston, of course, but business owners, residents, groups that use the river for kayaking groups, the rowing clubs. They all have a stake in what happens, and everybody's got to be heard so that the end result is something that matters for them and that works out for them.
Is there a vision for what you want done? Is there a solid vision at this point, or are you still in the planning stage?
Oh, I think the vision is pretty solid. In fact, we've just done this book. I don't know if you've seen this, Revitalizing Hudson Riverfronts. This is our guide for riverfront development, and it pretty much spells it out, and everyone pretty much agrees with these connecting people to the river, a mix of uses, so it's not just, say, one use, like all condominiums. That would not have a lot of dynamism on the riverfront. So a mix of different types of uses, a lot of activities. One thing that Kingston's done that's really successful, they program their riverfront very well. The parks down on the Rondout, almost every week in the summer, they've got some kind of festival going on there that attracts a lot of people, and other communities now are doing the same thing.
You, how far up and down the river is this project? And I mean, you're starting all the way down in Westchester County, going all the way up to Albany and trying to revitalize waterfronts along the way?
Well, we work all the way from Yonkers up to the Capital District, so we do work with communities up and down the river in various stages, so yes.
Is there a model of a city that's done that you can point to and say, this is what it could be?
Well, I think they're all works in progress. Each has their own, I think positive aspects. Kingston, there's a lot of good things going on in Kingston. We're very, very happy to see what's going on in Kingston. Poughkeepsie also, a lot of progress has been made in Poughkeepsie over the past 20 years, especially now with the walkway over the Hudson being constructed there. You know, that's one term that planners like to use, adaptive reuse. Take something that's not being used anymore and maybe turn it into something different. So that was an old railroad bridge. Now it's a fabulously successful park. It gets 500,000 people a year visit that park. It's generated over about $9 million in economic activity and about almost 400 jobs.
And so successful that the governor recently said maybe that's what they should do with the Tappan Zee Bridge, which they're thinking of rebuilding.
Yeah, that's under study.
What else are you doing land advocacy-wise? Are there inland things that you're doing?
We pretty much stick to the riverfront. There's enough going on there that keeps us busy.
And so anything that has to do with maybe getting a parcel of land on the river that is deeded to you guys to use or something that falls under your?
Well, we are always creating parks. I personally don't create the parks. We work very closely with our parks team, our land acquisition team. We want to make sure, our focus is to make sure the cities are strong, the cities and villages on the river, places like Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, Kingston, Cold Spring, the city of Hudson, those types of places. We want a lot of activity in those cities. We want them to have jobs. We want people to be successful, to live there, have good economic activity, but then protect the farmland and the parks and the conservation lands that surround those cities and connect people from the cities to those conservation lands and to those parks so they can get back and forth and enjoy those areas.
Terrific, yeah, that's great stuff. Who are you working with in local and state government on projects like this, Jay?
Well, our outreach to government is quite strong. We work at the local municipal level with county executives, with members of the state assembly and senate, also with the administration in Albany. So that's something that we have been really growing, I'd say, over the last 10 years, our connections with government, and we do work on policy issues as well.
We're going to talk about the organization of Scenic Hudson in just a moment and talk about some volunteering opportunities because that's a big part of what Scenic Hudson is.
Right.
This is Kingston Now. We'll be back in a moment and wrap up. You're watching Kingston Now, and with us again from Scenic Hudson is Jay Burgess and Jeff Anzevino. Jay, we were talking before the break about the organization of Scenic Hudson. Now, there are people who are hired, like yourself and Jeff, to work for the company, for the organization, excuse me, but also you have a strong volunteer corps. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, altogether we have about 20,000 members. Those are people who are financial supporters. We're a nonprofit organization, so we rely upon support from individuals and foundations and businesses and government. And then we have people who are advocates who we connect with a lot through email, and they turn out at meetings in their community to advocate for positive things along the waterfront. They communicate with leaders in Albany and sometimes at the national level. And then we have a lot of people who are increasingly working with us in our parks on trail work and cleanup and doing a lot of great work there.
We're heading into spring, so what kind of events does Scenic Hudson have coming up?
Well, one area of our volunteer activity that's really kind of exciting is something that's called citizen science. So we're doing work that complements New York's DEC efforts to monitor fish and eel populations in tributaries. So we have some folks who are going to be working with us. They'll get some training and then work with us on 4 or 5 different days to be collecting, counting, and then releasing these creatures from the tributaries. Then we have activity where we're removing some invasive plants that kind of throw the ecosystem out of balance, do some planting with replacement natural plants in those areas. And as I described, a lot of trail work to make sure that people can enjoy good, safe trails with wonderful views in our parks.
You also do sort of workshops and guided hikes and things too, is that correct?
Yeah, if you go to ScenicHudson.org, it's very easy at the top of our website to find a listing of all of our parks, and we really urge you to go out and explore them and connect with nature and the river. And we also have a listing under events of a real great schedule of dynamic, free, and fun events we're doing through the whole year.
I know one of my favorite parks that you guys maintain is Champonique, which is just outside of Kingston. It's an extraordinary area because it sort of is a microcosm of the Hudson Valley and the Catskill Mountains in one little, I don't know how many acre parcel it is.
About 570 acres, so it's one of our biggest parks.
It's amazing because you've got these really rocky sort of technical hiking trails. You've got some more gentler terrain as well. You get these amazing views of the Hudson River on one side, and when you get to the other side, you see the Catskills, and you've got a great pond in the middle.
Right.
And I know that in late April, early May, there's also a terrific running race that you guys have there.
Yeah, it's our 5K trail run, and we get a great participation in it. So again, if you go to ScenicHudson.org, you'll be able to look under events and see all the information. And if you're a runner and enjoy a good technical run through these trails, we'd love to have you come out.
Jeff was asking before we started rolling, what makes it a technical trail? What makes it a technical trail is that there are rocks and there are roots, and it's sort of narrow, sort of single track, maybe 1 or 2 people can run on the trail at once, but it's not so challenging that people can't come out and have a really good time. So I heartily endorse people coming out for the spring sprint. Also in the parking areas at all your parks, you have wonderful displays that describe the area. And I can spend a lot of time reading them. For instance, in Champonique, it describes what it was like, how it was formed, that there used to be a sort of community up top called, I think, Poppletown,
right,
of people who used to tan the trees, take the bark from the trees and tan it, and how it's reverted back to this amazing natural state is really wonderful. So it's again, what I would consider one of the jewels in your park system, though with 50, I've got a lot to go.
And we do have a number that are really convenient to Kingston. Black Creek Forest Preserve, a wonderful 2.5-mile hike through the woods, and then you get right down to a small rocky shoreline at the river, very dramatic. We were an early and important financial supporter of Walkway Over the Hudson and helped to create Franny Reese State Park, which you can connect to by a trail there. And we've also, with some other groups, have helped to create a connection of trails from Walkway that let you explore a lot of wonderful things nearby. So I urge people to go to the website.
Also, a lot of our parks are accessible from Metro North, and that's really important. A lot of people live in New York City, they don't have cars, they want to find a way to get up to enjoy nature. Even Yonkers, Irvington, Tarrytown, Peekskill, Beacon, Cold Spring, and Walkway Over the Hudson, a lot of parks, and we've got a special brochure for that to help people find out how to get up to these parks by train.
You've also got a terrific website, and on the website I noticed that you have some long-range goals. We're in this era of climate change, and one of the things that Scenic Hudson seems to be concerned about is rising sea levels. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Jeff can comment a little more, but one thing I'll just say that's one aspect of preserving land that is so important. Land is really a cornerstone to a healthy environment. It helps with air and water and wildlife and other things. But one of its great aspects is it creates a buffer with wetlands and other things to deal with some of the results of climate change. But Jeff really knows a lot about that.
Yeah, in fact, there was just an article in the New York Times today about nationwide the concern about rising sea levels. Sea levels have been rising, they're expected to continue to rise, and of course people like to be as close as they can to the shoreline. For example, the marina where I keep my sailboat gets buffeted by storms, and now they're adapting to these rising waters, where they're moving parts of the building back. The room that used to get flooded is now an open deck, and the same thing can happen with different types of land use along the river as well. We're kind of moving things back from the river so that they don't get damaged, but we continue to have that use.
Well, it's great work that Scenic Hudson is doing, and I'm looking forward to the 50th anniversary celebration next year. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's it for this week's show. Our thanks to Jay Burgess and Jeff Anzevino of Scenic Hudson. To find out more about Scenic Hudson and how to volunteer, go to scenichudson.org. You can also find Scenic Hudson on Facebook and Twitter. And remember, all of our shows are now archived on our YouTube channel, and you can find the link on our Facebook page. You can also suggest topics for future shows, too, on Facebook. For Kingston Now, I'm Jimmy Buff. I'll see you next time.